Oh, thank you for that amazing introduction, and for those very thoughtful words about the book. I really I didn't realize that your husband doesn't have a sense of smell, because I think I was just talking to Claudia over dinner, and I don't actually have a very strong sense of smell myself, which is why it's sort of an interesting topic for me to be reading about. And I will be reading that poem about ginger. That's one of the poems I chose for tonight. But I'd like to start with poems from my first book, which is The Clarity of Distance. But first of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's such an amazing space. It's just beautiful. And it's, all of you are writers. I think most of you are writers, and most of you have been on stages, and you know how, am I too, oh, I thought I was just speaking loud. Magic. It's magic. I think you all know how you can sort of pick up the feeling from the audience, and this is just, you're a lovely audience to be with, so thank you. Right, so I'll get to, I wanted to read from my first book, which is called The Clarity of Distance. And I know this is not very original of me, and I suspect it's been done before, but I'm going to start with a tree poem. Sorry, so this was, a lot of the poems that were written, that are in this book were written in Germany, where I lived for a very long time, and my husband and I lived for very many years in a four-story building, and we were on the top floor, and our dining room window sort of looked out onto these two beautiful pine trees. And I think maybe about a decade after we'd moved in, the neighbors in whose garden these trees were decided that they were too big, and they threw this long shadow over their garden, and so they had them cut down, and it was a really painful thing to watch, because it didn't even happen all at once. It happened over months, and it was just, anyway, so this is my poem. It's not a very happy poem to start with, but here we go. It's called Stripping. Just the branches first, hacked to the elbows, as if to test for reaction. When there was none, they disappeared completely. The sap ran red and sticky from the scars, down the length of the trunks all winter, glistening in the half-light. The heads were next to go, both on the same day. Neat, pointed spears left stabbing at the sky, 4 stories high. There they stood, mute, mutilated, tall twin carcasses in a sunlit garden, waiting. The next one is slightly different. It's called Rome. The Colosseum was warm-boned, furry, and there was a painting of a snake in a tree. The street smelt of silence in the afternoon, rich and bitter and strong. But the purple evening had no sleeves and dangled with woolen tassels in the wind. I stared at the lady in the marble clothes for a long time. She made me sad. So I closed my fist around her and sprinkled her over the chocolate mountains from the plain when we left, so she could melt into the white flakes at the top and forget. I didn't forget, though. So one more poem from this collection, and it's called Sadhana. And Sadhana is a Sanskrit word, and it's a meditation, a spiritual exercise in Hindu and in the Buddhist traditions. And essentially, the person doing this exercise tries to, the idea is to try and absorb, to call a divinity and sort of absorb that divinity into themselves. And I chose, for this particular poem, it's Uma, who is the goddess of dawn. And again, this was written in Germany. Yeah, okay, so. Slit the night's starred skin, slowly, slowly, the timing of it is everything, and peel it back. The flesh exposed will swell, sharp and fibrous, dripping light. The world will flatten and stones break like dry leaves. If a bird call whips the air, don't flinch. It's just a side effect of time. Spit the fluffy pinkness out beyond the bruise-webbed whalebone mouth where paths form silver blue and faithless. The crunch of swallowed breath, martini dry, is purer then. And when you turn away, be sure to lick those chilled lips. Your spine stained blue, the dawn creaking high in the trees. So, Bottles and Bones, which Claudia already talked about, was published last summer. And many of the poems in it, not all, but a great deal of them are about fragrances and about the sense of smell and about not having a sense of smell. And I hadn't realized when I started writing poems, I usually don't write poems on a theme because I just don't have the attention span to stick to it. You know, I just get bored after 2 poems. But there is just so much in the world of perfumery that it's fascinating. I could probably write another 5 books on them. There's the botanicals that go into them. There's the women that wear them. There's the myths around the ingredients. There's even just the names of perfumes and where those names come from. And so I'm really going to start with one which sort of uses a made-up name as for a poem as a springboard, and it is in fact the name which includes ginger in it. So this is The Moon and Ginger. You grew up with it, this light. It swelled with your bones, your words radiating moonlight as soon as you could utter sound. You thought it ossified certainties, a sickle red, thumbprints inevitable. Even now, some days you can hold the ginger notes in the background, clearly, in darkness. A lot of my poems also have to do with language and how you... just identity and language. I mean, I think also a lot of times, especially having moved country to country, English is my first language. I can't call it my mother tongue because my mother tongue is theoretically Bengali, but me and Bengali do not work well together. But English is not, it's a language that was brought to India, which is where I grew up, and so nobody would consider it as being a language that is mine. And I've always thought about that, so wherever I go, it's a language that I couldn't be a native, especially in Germany, people never really thought of me as being a native speaker when it came to English, because how could it be? Anyway, so that's a thought that always kind of goes through my head, especially when I'm writing in English. This is Somewhere Borrowed, Somewhere Blue. I thought I knew where I came from, but I lied. I shift my truths like furniture in a rented house. Cumin, coriander, tuberose. What does it matter if my memory draws blanks? Even perfumers are anosmic. Everywhere I go belongs to other people. I must be careful with my words. They are borrowed currency. This next poem is not a perfume poem, but I feel like I can talk about it. It's a good time to talk about it because it's kind of been, it's called Vanta Black, and it's kind of, this substance has been in the news in the Olympics a little bit because, so Vanta Black is a man-made substance which is the darkest substance known to man. It absorbs 99.96% of light, and it's rather incredible if you look at it. If you go onto the net or whatever and look at it, if you look at something that is three-dimensional and it looks flat, it's remarkable. It's like, so you can look at something which is maybe a pyramid, but it looks like you're just looking at a black triangle. And I think, I'm trying to remember his name, but there's a British Indian architect who has just built a pyramid. I think it's a pavilion, it's the Hyundai pavilion at the Winter Olympics using Vanta Black, and it's a pretty cool concept. So you look at it, and it looks like you're coming into a black hole with these stars just kind of, dangling in the middle of this blackness, and you go in, and it's all light inside. So that's the background to Vanta Black, and here's the poem. Last night, I met a physicist who said he had 10 years left to research the existence of God. I spent all day today a figment of my own imagination, breathing outside time, eliminating everything except resistance. And sticking with the absence of light, the next poem is called Kali, and Kali in the Hindu mythology is the goddess of destruction. She is the destroyer of evil, and the female equivalent of Shiva. And I'm going to give you a long explanation because, although the poem is really short, because if you were in India, if people in India, when I say Kali, they would have an instant mental image of who I'm talking about, and I'd just like you to have that as well. She is depicted. She's a very fierce woman, pretty terrifying. So she's got this black skin, and she has her tongue hanging out, and it's red, and she has a garland of severed heads bleeding, and she's standing on this demon who she's just getting. She's holding up his head, which he's just cut off. So she's pretty scary. And what the reason I brought up the absence of light is she is shown as having black skin, but not black as a skin color, but black as in the absence of color. So the opposite of light. So another take on black, I guess. And this is Kali. I cannot smell life either. Perhaps that's what we have in common. Yesterday I saw her in two forms and did not recognize her. Her darker, truer self was centered, but further away, and I was distracted by the drums. I've got a few poems in here which are about specific perfumes, because there are these very iconic perfumes that people just know about. I've got one about Nina Ricci's L'air du Temps. I've got one about Shalima, who was the Maharani of Jaipur's favorite perfume. But I'm going to read the one about Chanel No. 5. Which I love, and it was my mother's favorite perfume. So I was trying to research a little bit about, read up a little bit about Chanel No. 5 and kind of what the background was. And apparently the perfumer who created it was trying to recreate the smell of the water in the Arctic at night. And it just sounds like such a marvelous romantic idea. And I'm like, I got to write about this. So then I thought about it a little bit, and I'm like, okay, somebody needs to tell this man that water is colorless, tasteless, and odorless. So, I mean, we learned that in high school. So, trying to recreate the scent of water is kind of nonsensical. So there was that. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I'm actually afraid of water. I have nightmares of drowning. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I'm even more afraid of the dark. So I still love the perfume, but this is my poem about the scent of water at midnight. Rich, oily thing with no reflection. A new moon is no moon, and clean tastes ironic. Did you expect frangipani, chameli? I could suffocate you with what I see. One more, just one very short poem to end with. An absence of everything. The way the bed breathes as the quilt settles over you, and then it stops. Right, thank you.